Luke 4, Luke 3.
Luke 4?
Luke
Three.
3,
Oh,
20
record. Gussie
21
said.
to 23. If you turn there, and what we're going to do, because the last mention of items that that is mentioned here as to why 70 weeks are decreed upon Daniel's people and Daniel's city, makes mention of the anointing of the most holy, which we say, well, maybe some people it's the holy place, which again, Jesus covers that. But when was Jesus in the natural anointed? And I think Luke makes reference to this. Luke 3, 21 through 23. Somebody read that.
When all of the people were being baptized, Jesus was baptized too. And as he was praying, heaven was opened and the Holy Spirit descended on him in bodily form like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are Son whom I love. With you I am well pleased." Jesus himself was about 30. Did you tell me to say this? 30 years old when he began his ministry. He was the son, so it was thought, of Joseph, the son of Heli.
So he's 30 when he's anointed, and then he begins his ministry, begins to teach. If we look at Luke 3, verses 1 and 2, somebody read that real quick.
In the 15th, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, Herod Tetrarch of Galilee, I should have let you read this, his brother Philip of someplace, and Lysanias of Abilene.
Abilene.
Thank you. During the high priest of Annas and something else, the word of God came to John, son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. You want me to go on?
No. All this basically did was Luke went to great lengths to provide the names and the places and the years of the reigns that allow us to put a timestamp on when Jesus was anointed. So based on this, if Tiberius, who in verse 1D you said his 15th, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius. Now Tiberius became ruler in 11 through 14 AD. So now we're in AD. So between 11 and 14, there's some debate on, which of those 2 to 3 year period he actually became ruler, because he was supposedly joint ruling for a time with Augustus or maybe his father or something. But so between that little window, 11 to 14 AD, 15 years from that point, Jesus is baptized in the wilderness. So we want to say between 26 and 29 AD, Jesus is baptized and his ministry begins, okay? So he's 30. Jesus is 30 when he's anointed, and we want to say he's probably then born between 5 BC and 2 BC.
That's so weird. I thought he was born. I thought that BC and AD were based on when he was born. Like he was born.
I don't think it's accurate.
Oh.
What is it based on then, if it's not based on that?
He's saying it's inaccurate. It is based on that, but it's not accurately based on that.
I think they surmised that it was actually like somewhere around 3 BC. So that would make him, and remember, there's no 0. So it went to like 2 BC, 1 BC, and then 1 AD. So they skipped the 0 year. So it's in order to figure it out, you got to use your fingers and toes to try and figure out, wait, what? Like, it's hard to figure out, but somehow a year is lost. So if you go forward, if Jesus is born between, say, like 3-4 BC, and you go 30 years forward, you're somewhere in the vicinity of 26 to 28, somewhere in that general area,
Right.
and that's AD.
Right.
So that being said, let's go back to Daniel 9:25.
Know and understand this, from the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler comes, until the anointed one, the ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble.
Okay, so in this verse, we recognize what the countdown seems to be when the 70 times 7, or the 490 years begins. Okay, and that it begins with the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. All right, now the big question mark that's been going on for ages is when did that happen? Okay, I'll briefly tell you one of the first one. I don't have any information on, but Cyrus was one that made some proclamation.
Right.
Okay, that's the first one, when Cyrus releases them to go back to their land. I think we made mention of that. But remember, this commandment is to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the anointed one. So whether there's nothing that says Cyrus made a commandment, and that's exactly what was said. Okay.
Right.
Now
Okay.
he did release them and allowed them to go back, but they've got to be allowed to rebuild it, and it's got to be an official commandment from some leader somewhere, according to that.
So I'm confused.
Uh-huh.
There will be 7 sevens, and then it says, and 62 sevens.
Okay, we're gonna work our way. I agree.
Oh, we're not there yet?
Yeah, we're
Sorry.
not there yet. Now, we just talked about Cyrus, who could have been one of the ones to issue the restore and build Jerusalem. It's not, there's not a concrete proof of that. That's black and white. So let's move on to the second one. The second one would be potentially be Artaxerxes, okay, who was another commander, either the 5th or 6th. He was the 5th or 6th leader of Persia. Remember, Cyrus was like one of the first ones of Persia when the Medes and Persians took over. Artaxerxes was like one of the, I think he was 6th in line, although there was an assassination. So one of the previous 5 before Artaxerxes was assassinated, and the same year that previous guy took over, Artaxerxes takes over. So there is a passage in Ezra, and again, we don't have to read this, but the debate is, can you go to a passage in the Old Testament that's extremely black and white that says, yes, here's the commandment, you go back and rebuild, and what is it, restore and rebuild Jerusalem? But this is one of the second ones that they think the decree may be, Artaxerxes, and his was in 457 or 458 BC. So about 80 years-ish from when Daniel gets this from the angel, or Gabriel. So it would be like 80 years into the future, which would put us around 457, 458, okay? I went through Ezra to try and see if it said exactly what it says in Daniel 25. It doesn't. It talks at times about the temple, and it's hard to nail down. Is this the decree? And you can't figure it out exactly, but we know the years. So 57, 457, 458. So that leaves us with the third one, which was also Artaxerxes, but it would have been 20, or I'm going to say actually 13 years further into his reign. And this goes into Nehemiah, which may or may not talk about, may or may not be. Now, some of the issues that happened when the people went back to Jerusalem and started to rebuild is that the people that were there or some of the neighboring communities would go in and hinder them, and the work would be shut down, and they try and stop it. And then the people would say, no, the king of the Mede said, or Persian said, we can do this. And then they'd have to send a letter to the king, and then he'd have to authorize it and send it back. And so there was multiple stops and starts.
Oh,
But we have, of the three, the last two that I mentioned, which may fit the timeline, okay, 457-ish or 444, which could fit the timeline.
When was the Cyrus? What year did Cyrus?
I want to say when he released the people sometime around 535-ish, sometime around there, he let the people go back to Jerusalem then. But whether there was an official decree that said to rebuild, a commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, it's nobody knows 100%. Everybody tries to fill this in based on when Jesus, death was, or whatever the case may be. So that's how we pursue it the same way, because nobody knows for sure.
I thought it had to be, or not had to be, but I thought it was like 400 and some years later.
It was 490.
So 490 years later, but then what would 80 like? So they're like kind of not worried about the 70 sets of 7. They're just saying for them to finish, to rebuild.
Well, the angel gave them the starting point, but us as the reader can't exactly put our finger exactly when the starting point is.
Oh.
So we're thinking it was one of the two, but even then there's so much debate on whether it is. And then there was a stopping and starting. And is the angel taking in consideration the pauses in action? Now, we've given 2 dates so far. We have 458, and then we also have 444. So really, if you kind of try and subtract, you could probably say, well, it's sort of 30, 25 to 30 AD-ish, maybe 35 or 40 AD, between one of these two Artaxerxes ones, but we're not sure. So I was going to read something, but I'm going to skip it for time's sake. Let's read the rest of 925. From the going forth of the command to restore and to build unto the anointed one, the prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. How many weeks is that?
60.
Some.
69. But remember, the angel had said 70 years. So 69 actually ends up being 400. Remember, it's 490 years. Well, this seems to cut short the last 7 years. So instead of there being 70 weeks, or 70 times 7, 490 years, now there's one less, and there's only 69. So let's
say that again.
But okay, the angel had said 490.
Right.
Well, it said 70 weeks, and we said 70 times 7, that's 400.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So
it's 60 some.
Now it's 69. The angel who's trying to explain could have been a whole lot more specific. Why he made this so complex is beyond me, if he really wanted Daniel to understand. But
It's like he didn't,
right.
It's
I
like he
know.
didn't want anybody to understand.
I know, right? Now think about this for a second. We have 69 weeks here. And 69 times 7 is 483 years. So now we have the year 457 plus these 483 years brings us to 27 AD.
Oh,
What
that's
happened?
He was he like starting his ministry in
Yeah,
well, I
27?
I think he was anointed in 27.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
how
yeah,
many weeks are unaccounted for at this point?
Huh?
How many years, just the last grouping of 7
7?
is unaccounted for. So we would have, if this fits, from 457 BC, and then you add these 69 weeks, or 69 times 7, which is 483, it brings us up to possibly the year Jesus was anointed, which is 27 AD. Are you with me, Mag, or are you?
I'm a little bit, I was up until the 490, but then the 60, I think because I'm reading a different version. I was like, where'd that come
At
from?
the end of 25, or the middle of 25,
Yeah,
the angel says there shall be 7 weeks. He says 69 weeks, and it shall be built again with street and moat, even in troublous times, I think is how he says. So
yeah.
the
Mine,
angel, go ahead.
mine had said 7 sets of 7 plus 62 sets of 7.
Okay, what's being said is,
Which
you know
is,
how there's-
wait, that's 69. That's a
69.
total of 69. So we were talking about 77s. What Dara is saying, we're now talking 69 sevens. Where's that extra group of 7s?
Oh,
So we're just trying to discuss why we're missing a week.
And
Why are we
what the
missing
heck any of it
7?
mean, Really?
Yeah.
yeah.
Here's
Okay.
another thing. The angel, he originally says 70 weeks or 77s, which we just multiplied out to 490.
Yeah.
Now he's breaking that 70 times 7 down to 70 times 7, or 7 times 7, and then 62 times 7. And he's leaving out the last 1 times 7. I'm probably making this more confusing. The angel's taking the number 70 times 7 and breaking it down into smaller portions,
Yeah.
which we don't know why.
Right.
Makes it confusing.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out why. So in the last part of 25, it says it shall be built again with street moat in troublous times. What shall be built again?
The temple, right?
Oh, I thought it was Israel.
It's the city, and it would be Daniel's people, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Jerusalem.
Now, here's a dumb question, but what does Jesus come to build, spiritual or natural?
Fair.
Right. So again, the angel's referring to something that maybe happens in the natural, but the most holy or the anointed comes to build a spiritual kingdom and a spirit with a spiritual temple, which we're all part of.
Yeah.
There also, it makes mention of wall and street, and I'm not going to get into that because I'm running short of time, but it'll be built again during troublous times, and troublous times would be, who do you think the troublous times are referring to would be?
When the Roman Empire was there.
Yeah. It also, it could be troublous times during the end of God's natural people's time, who reject their Messiah without even really realizing it. It could be the Rome. It could be the troublous times of the end of their spirit, their natural kingdom. We don't know, but.
And the thing about it is the temple was rebuilt, it's not that far, within 100 years of this writing. So the temple stayed where it was until 70 AD, right?
The temple
Or was it
just-
destroyed again in 100 and something BC?
No, what was destroyed by, was it Nebuchadnezzar? One of those kings had gone in and just totally leveled it.
Yeah, that's when everybody was taking captivity back to Babylon, right? But wasn't there a time where it was destroyed again?
In
I know
70
70 AD it was.
70 AD it was destroyed.
Okay.
Yeah. So somehow it was built up again at some point, but then it was destroyed in 70 AD. But let's read 26 real quick. 26 is confusing and 27 is confusing too. But somebody read 26.
After the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. The people of the ruler, is that all? No, the people of the ruler who will come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. What? That didn't make any sense. After the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy like the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end and the desolations have been decreed.
So it says the beginning of this verse, it says after 62 sevens, which anyone know what that means?
This one says, and I don't know what it is, after 4 and 2 weeks,
4 and 2 weeks?
3 score.
Oh, 62 weeks. So remember how the angel broke it down into, of the 70, he broke it down into the first 7, and then 62, and then there was 1 that was unaccounted for. So it suggests here that first 7's already been mentioned, and now they're starting this verse after the 62. So even though it says after the 62 weeks, shall the anointed be cut off, it's actually includes the first 7 that have already passed too. If you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The 70.
This is the end of 69 weeks.
Yeah, this would be 69. So he breaks the 70 into the first 7, then he adds 62 to it, and then he leaves the 1 accounted for that he begins to discuss. So even though he says after the 62 weeks, he's just talking about that section. So here we're at week 69 here in the timetable or what have you. And we find that the anointed is cut off. And who would be cut off? Who would be cut off here? It says he should be cut off and have nothing. Who's that? The anointed.
Jesus.
Jesus, you would think, right? So let's look at it. Let's look at something real quick. Maybe this helps, Meg. This would probably help you to see this. You guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, we have the timeline. Okay,
Mhm.
let's start at the beginning. This is 457. This is Artaxerxes. He decrees, again, we don't have proof of this, but we say, well, hey, it fits. Maybe this works. So we have here the first 7 weeks right here. You see 7 weeks,
Uh-huh.
followed by the next 434 years, which is 62 weeks. So here's 7, and here's this stretch here is the next 62. So that's 69 right here. Okay, 69 sevens, which brings us to Messiah, the Prince, in 27 AD right here. You guys see that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we think 27 AD would be the end of the 483 years, leaving us just this last 7 years here, of which case it makes mention in 26, the anointed is cut off and has nothing, and the people of the prince that shall come and destroy the city and sanctuary shall be the flood even unto the end. And it's sort of now jumped into an area we're not 100% sure what it means. Okay.
It is 3.5 years, 3.5 years. That's weird.
Yeah, it actually is really weird. Let me kill this real quick. And we're going to move on to verse 27 before we look at 26. I hope we have time. I don't want to stop at the end here. Let's read 27. It'll help explain, hopefully, the rest of 26.
All right, turn.
Mhm.
The ruler will make a treaty with the people for a period of 1 set of 7. But after half this time, he will put an end to the sacrifices and offerings. And as a climax to all his terrible deeds, he will set up a sacrilegious object that causes desecration until the fate decreed for this defiler is finally poured out on him.
Okay, let's talk about this, as this verse has a great controversy. It says he makes a
Yeah, it
covenant
is.
for a week. Who makes the covenant for a week, and how many weeks do we have left?
1.
1 week of 7's left. He makes a covenant. So what happens at the beginning of that 1 week? Who's anointed?
You said he was when he was 27, right?
Yeah, 27-ish. Actually, he was 30, but it's in 27 AD. He makes a covenant for a week, and in the midst of the week, remember all that's remaining is the 70th week. We know what happens in the midst of the week, or in the middle of the week. Jesus is killed. And it says he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. Who causes the sacrifice and oblation to cease?
Jesus,
Why?
with his death,
Right, so the
went
Jewish,
down and kicked his butt. Got
so
defeated.
so what's no longer relevant?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifices, right?
The Jewish sacrifices no longer has any value. So at the halfway point.
Oh
his
my
death-
gosh, we read this so differently when we grew up.
Right. So the sacrifice in the temple in Jerusalem is worthless. The only sacrifice that counts, again, go back to Hebrews 9 and how Jesus puts blood on the Holy of Holies because of his death. It's now, and the veil is open now.
Right. Yeah.
Now, upon the wings of abomination shall come one that makes desolate. Amongst many detestable things, one abomination makes completely barren. It could be that they're referring to Jesus's crucifixion here, which makes everything desolate. Or it could be the Jewish people's abomination makes their own altar desolate. It could be.
I mean, it could be.
And it says wrath is poured out upon the desolate to make a full end. When does, Deb, you had made mention of when the temple is destroyed, which is what we said.
70 AD.
Now, temple is destroyed by Rome via Titus, and God's wrath is poured out and the temple is destroyed. So Jesus dies somewhere around 31, maybe the spring of 31, he dies and he's killed. God gives Rome maybe another 29 years. But he destroys the temple in 70 AD. So this verse, even though we've always saw it to be Antichrist,
Yes.
they're the ones that have destroyed their own temple without realizing and making it a desolation because they killed Jesus.
But that's a good thing. That's what should have happened.
Right. So if we go back to 26,
Wait, what verse did you guys always think was the Antichrist?
27.
27.
I wouldn't have.
And he, Megan, and he will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. So we were always taught that was the Antichrist who made a covenant. And in the middle of the covenant, he was going to turn on the people of God. And really, when you read this, when he says he will put an end to sacrifice and offerings, that's exactly what Hebrews says.
Right.
That's what he does.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is not about the Antichrist. This is
They
about,
made so many things up, didn't they?
well, I mean, they thought they interpreted correctly.
Back to 26, it says, in the middle part, it says, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now, the people of the prince that shall come. Who's the prince that shall come in the halfway through 26?
People
the-
of the,
Who's
Is-
the,
is that-
who's the prince?
that- Jesus
It has to be Jesus, because Jesus is referred to a prince.
and the anointed one, it's not capitalized, but it, you know,
No, it should be, if it is.
In the previous verse, the anointed one, and the word prince is the same as the previous verse. So in
Oh, is it?
26, yeah, it's the same Hebrew word. Now, it may not be capitalized in either one because maybe they didn't know, maybe they thought there's another prince, and the prince
different print.
that shall come could be the Antichrist prince, but it fits if you say the people of the prince that shall come. Well, who is the people of the prince that shall come? It's either the Jews who,
Yeah.
by killing Jesus, didn't realize they were sealing their own fate, and the whole temple and everything was going to be destroyed, or it could be a reference to God's New Testament people. Because remember,
Yeah,
God, as you said at the beginning, I think Debbie said it about God repeats things, that what is what shall be. And so if God's First Testament people goes off the rails, we know God's New Testament people do the same thing. And it could be the people of the prince that comes could be a reference to the Christians that
Yeah.
come, and the end shall be with a flood, and desolations are determined on God's Christian second people. It could be that. It could be referring to Rome, or it could be talking about the Jews. But I don't think it's talking about an Antichrist.
I
Me
don't think so.
neither. Not
Not-
anymore. That's funny. It's amazing.
I want to, there's just a little bit left, but Meg, we want to talk in a minute about what we grew up learning, because what we seem to see is there's a very logical explanation to this passage. We grew up believing that this 490 years pauses at the 69th year, and then the 70th year is the tribulation, of which
Right.
then the Antichrist appears then, but that doesn't happen for over like 2,000 years into the future. But you can make it fit where it fits naturally and refers to Jesus. But that still leaves us, if Jesus made it to the 69th and a half year, then the question becomes, what happened in the last 3.5 years? All right, which we didn't
Yeah.
talk about yet. And we will in a minute. And let me just read this. This is a commentary I thought may or may not add a little bit to it, but just a little bit. It says the prophecy of the 70 weeks specifies that the Messiah was to come 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That's 7 and 62. So that's 69 after the decree of Artaxerxes, beginning in 457, going forward 483 years, we arrive at 27 AD as a date for the manifestation of the Messiah, which happened. We know that Christ was cut off or killed in the middle of the last week at
Right.
springtime at the Passover. This must
Right.
mean the Messiah was manifested to Israel 3.5 years earlier in the fall. Incidentally, this is also means Artaxerxes' decree was given in the fall. So it fits, okay? Now that leaves us the last 3.5 years. This is interesting. The last week, 7 years ended in, I think, 34 AD, probably in the fall of 34. It says by this is what a theory is. By the stoning of Stephen, the Jews finally sealed their rejection of the gospel. The gospel, or the disciples, were scattered abroad by persecution that went everywhere preaching the word. Shortly after, Saul, the persecutor, was converted and became Paul, the gospel to the Gentiles. So if we turn to, I know we have 4 minutes left. One of the significant things is if you looked at, I think it's in Acts 7, if any of you guys remember Acts 7, Stephen stands up to the Pharisees, and Stephen, they get angry at him and they begin to stone him, and he begins to speak words, castigating all the Pharisees. And then he is stoned, and he says the same thing Jesus does, which is, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. But at that point, the persecution of the people that lived in Jerusalem increased tremendously.
Wow, why?
At that point, the gospel went, as people moved away from Jerusalem, they moved out into the Gentile world. Okay. So one of the things that could potentially be, if you read, and we won't do this, but if you read these two potential theories in Acts 7 and 8, you find that the stoning of Stephen in 34 AD sent Paul, or Saul as he was known, into an outrage where he began to persecute everybody. That sent the gospel from just that little area out into the Gentile world.
Oh,
So did Jesus leave the window open for 3.5 additional years to the people or the Jews that were in Jerusalem? If the starting date is accurate, which is 457, and it goes 490 years, if that's accurate, we're not sure. If it does, then Jesus, or God, had mercy on the Jews for another 3.5 years, even after Jesus was
to
crucified.
give them a chance to recognize Jesus as the Messiah.
It would seem, but I can't say that 100% that makes complete and total sense. But because we can't prove it, but it would certainly open the door to saying, man, God is so much more merciful than maybe we understand.
Yeah.
Because
So loving and
he
good.
still left the window open even for a short time.
Yeah.
Can we do this? Can we spend like 2 more minutes? But
Yeah.
I'm like at the 1 minute mark, and I just wanted to talk about one other thing. Is that okay
Yeah.
for you guys?
Sign back on.
All right, bye.